Psalm 23, prayer for peace and strength, powerful prayer. There is a quiet moment like this, when your body has already settled into the surface beneath you, yet something inside you hasn't fully arrived. The room is still. The air feels almost unmoving, as if even time itself has slowed down just enough to notice what usually goes unseen. And in this gentle stillness, there is a part of you, small, almost unspoken, that is still holding something. Not loudly, not in a way that demands attention, but just enough to keep your thoughts lightly awake. You may not have named it today. You may not have even realized it was there while everything around you kept moving. But now, in the quiet where nothing is asking anything from you, it begins to surface in the softest way. A thought that drifts back in without warning. A feeling that doesn't quite have words. A quiet weight resting somewhere beneath your breath. And the gentle truth is, you don't have to figure it out tonight. You don't have to trace it back to where it started. You don't have to solve what feels unfinished. You don't have to carry it one step further than you already have. Because right now, in this still air, you are allowed to simply be here. Let your body rest exactly as it is. Let the surface beneath you hold your full weight without resistance. There is nothing you need to adjust. Nothing you need to correct. Just notice how the air around you feels unchanged, steady, quiet, as if it has been waiting for you to slow down enough to feel it. And maybe, without trying, you begin to notice your breathing, not in a forced way, not in a controlled way, just the natural rhythm that was already there before you paid attention to it. The soft rise, the gentle fall, like something inside you already knows how to let go, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. There is no rush here. Nothing in this moment is asking you to move faster, think clearer, or become anything different than you are right now. And in this kind of stillness, something begins to shift, not because you are trying, but because you are no longer holding everything so tightly. And somewhere within this quiet, there is a presence, not distant, not something you have to reach for, but something that has been here, even before this moment began. A steady, unseen nearness that doesn't interrupt, doesn't pressure, doesn't ask you to prove anything. You may not even have words for it yet. That's okay, because peace, the kind your heart has been quietly looking for, doesn't begin as something you understand. It begins as something you feel, slowly, gently, as if it has been waiting for you to stop carrying everything on your own. And strength, real strength, doesn't arrive as effort. It doesn't ask you to hold yourself together. It doesn't demand that you push through or stay in control. Instead, it begins to show itself in the exact moment you stop trying so hard to be strong. Right here, in this still air, you are not holding everything alone. Even if you haven't said it out loud, even if you haven't formed a prayer yet, there is one who already sees what you've been carrying. Not just the obvious things, but the quiet ones too. The things you brushed aside, the things you didn't have time to feel, the things that stayed with you long after the day moved on. And without asking anything from you, he stays, like a shepherd who doesn't rush the one who walks a little slower, who, who doesn't pull or force, but simply remains close, steady, present, aware of every step, even the ones you didn't notice yourself taking. You don't have to go searching for that kind of care tonight. You don't have to reach out and find it, because you are already within it, right here. As the air remains still around you, as your breathing begins to soften without effort, as your thoughts slowly lose their urgency, you are being gently led into a place you don't have to create, a place where peace isn't something you achieve, but something you enter. And you may not feel it all at once. It may come in small ways at first, a slight release in your shoulders, a breath that feels a little deeper than the one before, a quiet space between thoughts that lasts just a little longer than expected. That's enough. You don't need more than that right now, because this is how it begins, not with a sudden change, but with a quiet shift. where what once felt heavy slowly becomes something you no longer need to carry the same way. And as you rest here, without effort, without pressure, just allowing the stillness to hold you, you may begin to sense something else, a kind of guidance, so gentle it doesn't interrupt, yet steady enough that it never leaves, not leading you somewhere far away, but guiding you deeper into this very moment where you are already being cared for. You don't have to know the path ahead tonight. You don't have to figure out tomorrow. Because right now, you are being led beside something quieter, something calmer, something that asks nothing from you except that you allow yourself to rest within it. And as that awareness begins to settle, even just a little, you might notice that the part of you that was still holding on doesn't have to hold as tightly anymore, the weight you didn't name. There is a kind of tiredness that doesn't come from what you did, but from what you quietly carried without noticing. It doesn't always show itself clearly. It isn't loud or urgent. It doesn't ask for attention in obvious ways. Instead, it lingers somewhere beneath the surface, woven into your thoughts, resting in your body, settling into your breathing in ways that feel almost natural, until you finally become still enough to sense it. And tonight, in this unmoving air, you may begin to feel it more clearly, not as something overwhelming, not as something you need to fix, but simply as something that has been there, waiting to be acknowledged, without needing to be explained. You don't have to name it. You don't have to define where it came from or why it stayed, because some things don't need to be understood to be gently released. And as you rest here, letting the quiet surround you, you may notice how your body has been holding more than you realized, not in a dramatic way, but in small, almost invisible ways. A slight tension that never fully left, a readiness that never completely softened, a subtle sense of being on, even when there was nothing left to do. And maybe you've gotten used to that. Maybe it became so familiar that you stopped noticing it altogether. But now, without trying, you are becoming aware, not to analyze, not to fix, just to notice. And in that simple noticing, something begins to loosen. Because the moment something is seen, it no longer needs to stay hidden. And the moment you stop pushing it away, it no longer needs to press so quietly against you. There is nothing wrong with you for carrying what you carried. There is nothing you should have done differently. You moved through your day the best way you could, holding what needed to be held, staying steady where you had to stay steady, continuing forward even when part of you might have wanted to pause. And now, you are allowed to pause. You are allowed to set things down, even if you don't know exactly what they are, because you don't need perfect clarity to begin releasing weight. You just need a moment like this, where nothing is asking anything from you. And within this stillness, there is a quiet truth beginning to take shape. If you are no longer holding everything so tightly, then maybe you were never meant to hold it all alone. That thought doesn't need to be answered right away. It can simply rest there, gently, without urgency. Because right now, there is already a presence near you, aware of everything you've been carrying, even the things you never put into words. Not watching from a distance, not waiting for you to explain, but close, steady, attentive, like someone who understands without needing to be told. A shepherd who doesn't rush the one who slows down, who doesn't measure how much you've carried, but simply stays close enough that you don't have to carry it the same way anymore. And you don't have to reach for that closeness. You don't have to try to feel it. Because even in the moments where your thoughts drift, even in the spaces where your awareness softens, that nearness does not change. It remains, just as steady as the air around you now, unmoving, gentle, constant. And as you stay here, letting that stillness hold you, you may begin to notice something subtle shifting inside. Not everything at once, not all the weight disappearing in a single moment, but something loosening, something softening. as if the part of you that has been quietly holding on is beginning to realize it doesn't have to hold so tightly anymore. And you don't have to force that release. You don't have to push anything away. You can simply allow the weight to rest differently than it did before. Because even now, without effort, without striving, you are being gently led into a place where what once felt heavy no longer needs to stay the same. And you can remain right here in this quiet just a little longer, not to do anything, but to let that unseen weight slowly begin to lift in its own time. When thoughts begin to slow, there is a quiet shift that happens, not all at once, but gently, almost unnoticed at first. The thoughts that once felt close together begin to space out, not because you are forcing them to stop, and not because you suddenly found the answer to everything that was moving through your mind, but because something inside you is no longer holding on to each thought the same way. And in this still air, you may begin to feel that change. A thought appears, but instead of following it all the way through, you let it pass. Another one comes, softer this time, and it doesn't stay as long. And somewhere between those thoughts, there is a small space, a quiet gap where nothing is asking to be solved. You don't have to fill that space. You don't have to use it for anything. You can simply rest within it. Because not every thought needs a place to land tonight. Not every question needs to be answered. Not everything that crosses your mind deserves your attention, especially now, when your body has already begun to lean into rest, even if your mind is just starting to follow. And the more you allow those thoughts to move without holding on to them, the lighter they begin to feel. Not gone, but no longer pressing in the same way. Like something that was once close, now slowly drifting farther away, not lost, just no longer needing to stay. You are not losing control. You are releasing the need to control. And there is a quiet difference between those two things, because control asks you to stay alert, to keep track, to hold everything in place. But release allows things to move without you having to carry them. And right now, in this gentle stillness, you are allowed to release. You may notice your breathing again, not because you're trying to focus on it, but because it has become softer on its own, slower, steadier, more natural. Like, like something inside you has begun to trust the quiet. And as your breathing settles, your thoughts begin to follow. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough for you to feel the difference. And in that soft rhythm, there is a subtle sense of being led, not pushed, not directed with urgency, but gently guided towards something calmer, something quieter, something that doesn't ask you to think your way into it, like being brought beside still waters, where nothing is rushing, nothing is pulling, nothing is demanding that you move faster than you're ready to go. You don't have to see where that path leads tonight. You don't have to understand it. You can simply allow yourself to be here, where your thoughts are no longer the center of everything, and where silence is not empty, but full of rest. And if a thought does return, you don't need to resist it. You don't need to push it away. You can let it come and let it go, like something that doesn't need to stay, because you are no longer holding each thought as tightly as before. And the more you allow that, the more space begins to open, not outside of you, but within, a quiet openness where your mind can begin to rest without effort. And in that openness, peace begins to take shape, not as something dramatic, not as something overwhelming, but as something simple, steady, and quietly present. The kind of peace that doesn't arrive all at once, but grows in the spaces where your thoughts begin to slow. And you don't have to do anything to make that happen. It is already beginning, right here in this still air where your mind is no longer racing to keep up, but gently learning how to rest. The gentle release. There comes a moment, not marked by anything dramatic, when what you've been holding begins to feel different. Not gone all at once, not suddenly lifted away, but softened as if the weight itself is no longer resting on you in the same way. And in this still air, you may begin to notice that shift. It doesn't ask you to do anything. It doesn't require effort or intention. It simply begins in the quiet space you've already allowed. Because release, real release, doesn't happen when you try to let go. It happens when you realize you don't have to hold on anymore. And maybe, without even meaning to, you've already started. A part of you that was once holding everything together, staying steady, staying aware, staying ready, is beginning to loosen its grip. Not because you decided to, but because something deeper within you is beginning to trust that it is safe to. You don't have to force that trust. You don't have to convince yourself of anything. You can simply remain here, where the air is unmoving, where your breathing has found its own rhythm, where your thoughts are no longer asking for your full attention. And let that quiet work within you. There is nothing required from you right now, nothing to prove, nothing to complete, nothing to carry forward. And in that absence of pressure, something inside you begins to exhale more fully than before, a deeper release. Not just in your breath, but in the places you didn't realize were still holding tension. Your shoulders may soften without you noticing. Your jaw may rest without effort. Your body may begin to feel heavier, not weighed down, but supported. As if the surface beneath you and the stillness around you have taken over the work of holding you. And maybe for the first time today, you don't feel like you have to hold yourself together. You can simply be held. And in that subtle shift, something deeper begins to restore. Not quickly, not in a way that calls attention to itself, but quietly, steadily in the background, like something that has always known how to bring you back to rest. You don't need to understand how it works. You don't need to measure if it's happening, because the very fact that you are here, allowing this moment to unfold without resistance, is already enough. And as that restoration begins, you may notice how what once felt heavy no longer feels as fixed, not completely gone, but no longer rooted in the same place, like something that is beginning to loosen its hold on you, simply because you are no longer holding it so tightly in return. And you don't need to rush that process. You don't need to complete it tonight. You can let it unfold slowly, gently, in its own time, because you are not alone in it. Even now, there is a quiet presence staying close, aware of every subtle shift within you, every small release, every moment where you soften just a little more. Not watching to judge, not waiting for you to do it right, but remaining steady, patient, constant. Like a shepherd who understands that rest cannot be forced, who doesn't rush the one who is learning to let go, who simply stays near so that the one who is tired can finally stop trying so hard. And you don't have to reach for that presence. You don't have to hold on to it because it is already holding you in ways you don't need to see, in ways you don't need to control. And as that awareness gently settles, you may begin to feel something new, a lightness, not because everything has disappeared, but because you are no longer carrying it the same way. And that is where peace begins to deepen, not in the absence of everything, but in the quiet release of what you no longer need to hold. And you can remain here just a little longer, letting that release continue without effort, without direction, simply allowing what was once held so tightly to rest differently than before. God's presence without effort. There is a quiet point, somewhere between holding on and fully letting go, where something begins to feel different. Not because everything has changed, but because you are no longer alone in what you once carried. And in this still air, where nothing is moving, nothing is asking, nothing is pressing in, you may begin to sense that nearness more clearly, not as something you have to reach for, not as something distant that slowly comes closer, but as something that has been here all along, waiting for the moment you stopped trying to hold everything by yourself. You don't have to invite it in. You don't have to create space for it, because it was never outside of this moment. It was always here, quiet, steady, present, even when your thoughts were louder, even when your attention was elsewhere, even when you didn't notice. And now, as your breathing softens, as your body settles deeper into rest, as your mind no longer feels the need to follow every thought, you begin to feel it, not as a feeling you can fully explain, not as something that demands your focus, but as a gentle awareness, like being accompanied without interruption. You are not alone in this stillness. Even in the quiet places of your mind, where words don't reach, where thoughts begin to fade, there is a presence that remains, not watching from a distance, not stepping in only when called, but staying continuously, without change. And there is something deeply calming about that kind of nearness, because it doesn't depend on how you feel. It doesn't rise or fall with your awareness. It simply is, like a shepherd who does not leave when the path becomes unclear, who does not step away when the pace slows down, who remains not because you asked, but because that is who he is. And you don't have to follow perfectly tonight. You don't have to walk with clarity or direction, because even when you are unsure, even when your thoughts drift, even when your awareness softens into something quieter, you are still being gently led, not towards something far away, but deeper into this very stillness where you no longer need to strive, no longer need to hold yourself together, no longer need to carry what has already begun to release. And maybe, without even realizing it, you've already taken that step. The step where you stop trying to manage everything. The step where you allow yourself to be guided without needing to see where it leads. And in that place, something settles deeper than before. A calm that doesn't come from understanding, a steadiness that doesn't come from effort, a quiet assurance that even here, in this soft, almost wordless space, you are not alone. You don't need to hold on to that thought. You don't need to repeat it or keep it close, because it is already holding you. And as that awareness gently surrounds you, you may notice your body responding in ways that feel natural, unforced, almost effortless. Your breathing slows just a little more. Your muscles soften without instruction. Your thoughts become lighter, less defined, less important. Not because you pushed them away, but because something greater has taken their place. A presence that does not compete, a presence that does not interrupt, a presence that simply stays steady, quiet, constant. And in that quiet constancy, you begin to rest more deeply, not just physically, but internally. In the parts of you that were still holding on, still staying alert, still waiting for something to change. Nothing else needs to change right now, because what matters most is already here, and you are already within it. And as you remain in this stillness, without effort, without direction, simply allowing yourself to be, you may begin to feel something even softer, a quiet sense of being known without needing to explain yourself, a gentle awareness that everything you carried, everything you felt, everything you couldn't quite put into words was never unseen and never held alone. And you don't have to stay awake to keep that awareness. You don't have to hold on to it as you drift, because even as your thoughts become quieter, even as your awareness begins to fade into rest, that presence does not fade. It remains steady, unchanging, and gently, without asking anything from you. It continues to lead you further into peace, further into rest, right here, where you already are, safe without defending yourself. There is a quiet kind of safety that doesn't come from checking everything or staying aware or keeping control over what might happen next. It doesn't come from preparing or protecting or holding yourself in a state of readiness. It comes in a much gentler way. And in this still air, where nothing is moving, where nothing is asking you to stay alert, you may begin to feel the difference. Because for so long, a part of you may have stayed slightly guarded, not in a way you always noticed, but in small, quiet ways. A subtle readiness in your body, a habit of staying just a little aware, even when there was nothing left to do. a quiet sense that you needed to hold things together just in case. And maybe you didn't even realize how often you did that because it became normal. It became the way you moved through your day, the way you carried yourself, the way you rested without ever fully letting go. But now, here, in this gentle stillness, you don't have to do that. You don't have to stay alert to stay safe. You don't have to hold everything in place to keep things from falling apart. You don't have to defend yourself from anything in this moment because you are not alone here. And the presence that has been quietly surrounding you has not changed. It has not moved closer, and it has not moved away. It remains steady, aware, attentive, without needing anything from you. Like a shepherd who doesn't just walk ahead, but stays near enough to guard without effort, to protect without pressure, to bring comfort without needing to be asked. And you don't have to look for that protection. You don't have to reach out to secure it. Because even now, without you doing anything at all, you are already within it. And as that awareness settles, even just a little, something inside you begins to respond. The part of you that stayed slightly guarded begins to soften. The part of you that remained alert begins to rest. Not all at once, not completely, but enough to feel the difference. Enough to realize you don't have to stay in that state anymore. And you can let that softening continue without forcing it, without guiding it, just allowing your body to respond in the way it naturally wants to when it finally feels safe enough. Your shoulders may sink just a little deeper. Your breathing may slow without you noticing when it changed. Your body may begin to feel heavier, not because you are weighed down, but because you are no longer holding yourself up. And in that gentle heaviness, there is something deeply comforting because it means you are being held, not by effort, not by control, but by something steady, something constant, something that does not shift with your awareness. And as you remain here, letting that quiet sense of safety settle deeper within you, you may begin to notice that the need to stay aware is fading, not disappearing completely, but no longer leading, no longer guiding your thoughts, no longer shaping how you rest. Because you don't need to watch over this moment. You don't need to manage it. You don't need to stay present in a sharp, focused way. You can simply be here, softly, gently, without tension. And that is a different kind of safety, one that doesn't require anything from you, one that doesn't depend on how well you hold yourself together, one that remains even as your thoughts drift, even as your awareness softens, even as you begin to move closer to rest. And you don't have to hold on to that feeling. You don't have to keep reminding yourself of it because it is not something fragile. It does not fade when you stop paying attention. It stays quietly, steadily, without change. And as that realization gently settles, you may find that something even deeper begins to shift. Not just safety, but a quiet strength beginning to form beneath it. Not the kind of strength that asks you to try harder, not the kind that keeps you alert or engaged, but something softer, something steadier, something that begins to rise only after you no longer feel the need to protect yourself. And you don't have to reach for it. You don't have to define it because it is already beginning right here in this stillness where you are no longer defending yourself, where you are no longer holding everything alone, where you are simply being held. And you can stay here just a little longer, letting that quiet safety deepen, letting your body rest more fully, letting your awareness soften without needing to do anything at all. Strength that doesn't strive. There is a kind of strength that feels very different from the one you may have known before. Not the kind that asks you to hold everything together. Not the kind that keeps you alert, steady, ready. Not the kind that quietly exhausts you, even while it carries you through the day, but something softer. Something that doesn't begin with effort and doesn't depend on how much you can manage. And in this still air, where you are no longer holding yourself the same way, you may begin to feel it. not as a sudden surge, not as something that rises up and takes over, but as something steady, already there, becoming more noticeable only because you are no longer trying so hard to be strong on your own. And maybe this is the first time it has felt like this. A strength that doesn't ask anything from you. A strength that doesn't require you to prove anything. A strength that doesn't need to be maintained because it was never dependent on you in the first place. You don't have to reach for it. You don't have to activate it. You don't even have to understand it because it is not something you create. It is something you are being gently held within, like being brought into a place that was prepared for you before you even knew you needed it. A place where you are not trying to stay steady, but are already steady, simply by being there. And as that awareness begins to settle, you may notice something inside you responding, not with effort, but with quiet relief. The kind of relief that comes when you realize you don't have to keep doing everything the same way. You don't have to keep holding everything together. You don't have to keep being the one who carries it all. Because even now, there is something stronger than your effort, holding you, not in a forceful way, not in a way that interrupts your rest, but in a way that remains constant, even as you begin to let go more deeply. And that is where this strength lives. Not in striving, not in pushing forward, but in the quiet assurance that you are not the one sustaining everything. And as you remain here in this steady stillness, you may begin to feel how your body responds to that truth. There is less tension, less resistance, less of that subtle need to stay ready, to stay aware, to stay in control, because control is no longer required. And the moment that need begins to fade, something else takes its place. A calm steadiness that doesn't shift, a quiet support that doesn't weaken, a presence that doesn't come and go. And you don't have to hold on to that awareness because it is not something fragile. It doesn't depend on your focus. It doesn't disappear when your thoughts drift. It remains, even as you soften, even as you rest, even as you begin to slip gently towards sleep. And as that steady strength continues to hold you, you may begin to feel something even deeper. Not just that you are safe, not just that you are no longer carrying everything alone, but that you are being sustained in a way that doesn't require your effort. And that realization, quiet as it is, begins to settle into every part of you, into your breathing, now slower, softer, into your body, now heavier, more at rest, into your thoughts, now fewer, less defined, less important. Because when you are no longer striving to be strong, you begin to feel what it is like to be held by a strength that never tires. And you can remain here without effort, without direction, without needing to move forward, simply resting within something steady, something unchanging, something that continues, even when you don't. And as you stay in that quiet steadiness, just a little longer, your awareness may begin to soften even more, your thoughts drifting further apart, your sense of being here becoming lighter, less defined. Not because anything is fading away, but because you are gently moving into a deeper rest, where you no longer need to stay present in the same way. And you don't have to hold on to these words. You don't have to follow every sentence, because even as your mind begins to drift, that strength remains, holding you, steady, quiet, unchanging as you move gently toward rest, drifting without resistance. There is a point, very soft, almost unnoticeable, where staying awake no longer feels necessary. Not because you decided to sleep, not because you reached the end of anything, but because something inside you has become so at ease that it no longer needs to stay present in the same way. And in this still air, where everything has already slowed, you may begin to feel that shift. Your thoughts no longer forming as clearly as before. Your awareness no longer holding on to each moment. Your body already resting more deeply than you realize. And you don't need to follow every word now. You don't need to stay with each sentence or keep track of where your mind is going, because nothing here depends on your attention. Everything that needed to reach you already has. And now you are simply drifting, not away from something, but into something quieter, a space where thoughts come and go without shape, where awareness softens and gently loosens its hold, where the feeling of being here becomes lighter, less defined, almost like something fading into the background without disappearing. You are not losing anything. You are not letting go of something important. You are simply resting more deeply than before. And you don't have to try to stay here. You don't have to maintain this feeling because rest, real rest, does not require you to hold on to it. It continues, even when you don't. And as you drift, you may notice how everything feels just a little farther away. Not distant, not gone, just softer, less immediate, less demanding. Like the world itself has taken a step back, allowing you to remain here undisturbed, unbothered, at ease. And within that softness, something remains. Quiet, steady, unchanging. The same presence that was here when your thoughts were louder. The same nearness that stayed when you were still holding everything. The same gentle guidance that never asked anything from you. Still here, not fading, not moving, not leaving. And you don't have to stay aware of it. You don't have to keep it in your thoughts. Because even as your awareness begins to drift further, even as your mind becomes quieter, even as your sense of being here softens into something lighter, that presence does not fade. It remains, holding you without effort, steady without change. And there is nothing you need to do to stay within it. Nothing you need to remember. Nothing you need to follow. You can let your thoughts drift wherever they go. You can let your awareness soften however it wants to. You can let yourself move gently, naturally, into rest. And if a thought appears, it doesn't need to stay. If a feeling passes through, it doesn't need to be held. Everything can move freely without you needing to follow it. Because you are no longer holding anything in place. You are simply resting within something that is already holding you. And as that gentle drifting continues, your body may feel heavier, sinking more fully into the surface beneath you. Your breathing, slower, softer, almost unnoticed. Your thoughts, fewer, quieter, spaced farther apart, until even those begin to fade into something softer than thought. And you don't have to stay with these words now. You don't have to listen closely. You don't have to remain present, because this is the moment where rest continues on its own, where peace no longer needs your attention, where strength no longer asks for your effort, where everything you needed is already gently in place, and you can simply allow yourself to drift a little further, a little deeper, without resistance, without effort, without needing to stay, right here in this quiet, where you are already held. Peace that stays while you sleep. And now, there is nothing more you need to do. No next step to follow. No thought to complete. No feeling to hold on to. Because what you were quietly searching for has already begun to settle within you. The peace you needed, not as something distant, but as something present, gentle, and steady, has found its place in the stillness around you and within you. And the strength you thought you had to create has revealed itself in a different way, not through effort, not through holding on, but through being held. You don't have to keep that awareness close. You don't have to stay awake to protect it, because it does not depend on your attention. It remains, even as you drift, even as your thoughts soften into quiet fragments, even as your awareness becomes lighter, even as you move beyond words, beyond structure, beyond the need to follow anything at all. Nothing is leaving you. Nothing is slipping away. The same quiet presence that has been with you in every moment of this stillness remains just as steady now, not watching to see if you stay, not waiting for you to respond, but simply staying, as it always has, like a shepherd who does not step away when the night deepens, who does not lose sight of the one who rests, who remains, not because you are aware, but because you are known. And even now, as your body rests more fully, as your breathing becomes softer, slower, quieter, You are not alone in this rest. You are being gently kept, not in a way you need to feel, not in a way you need to understand, but in a way that continues, quietly, steadily, without interruption. And as you drift further, there is nothing you need to hold on to from this moment. Not the words, not the thoughts, not even the feeling, because what is settled within you does not need to be remembered to remain. It stays, softly, faithfully, without change. And even as your awareness fades into sleep, there is something that continues, a quiet goodness that does not leave when you stop noticing it, a gentle care that does not fade when you are no longer awake to feel it, a steady nearness that remains through every moment of the night, just as present, just as calm, just as unchanging. And you don't have to stay here to keep it. You don't have to follow anything further. You don't have to remain aware. Because this peace, this quiet strength, this gentle presence does not end here. It stays with you through the silence, through the night, through every breath you no longer notice. And as you rest more deeply now, you can let everything soften. Let your thoughts drift completely. Let your awareness fade. Let your body sink fully into rest, without effort, without resistance, without needing to hold anything at all. And even as you sleep, you are still being gently led, still being quietly kept, still resting within something steady, something peaceful, something strong that does not leave, that does not change, that remains all through the night and beyond.